Welcome, everybody. I would like to call this meeting to order at 9:37. Couple of reminders. The exits and the restrooms are over that way. You do have an estimate of travel form that we'll bring up again later, but just, think about what your expenses are. A reminder to mute your phones. I'm making sure mine's off. And to use your mic, so when you're addressing the meeting, to turn your mic on, and when you're not, go ahead and turn it off. We do have some call-in people. If you could please identify yourself and then remember to mute your phone when not speaking. So if you're calling in, please identify yourself.
This is Nancy Curie from Tarrant County College.
Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else? All right. I guess that meeting is now been called to order.
I'm sorry, so the next item on the agenda is a review of the December meetings. So I'm going to give you about a couple of minutes to review the minutes. Did someone just join us?
Yes, Kat Howard. Tried earlier and I got cut off.
Thank you, Kat.
Am I supposed to be able to hear anything through the phone feed, or should I turn my speakers up?
We're in the process of reviewing the minutes from December meeting.
Okay.
It looks like everyone's finished reviewing the meeting minutes. So having done so, do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move.
Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, moving to agenda item 3. This is an important task we have at their spring meetings where we're going to review courses. let me get Rebecca to basically explain what is expected, and then I'll talk briefly about the mechanics, and then we'll break into groups. If you're remote, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Thank you.
Okay. The next sheet in your agenda packet is your assignment to a work group. And how we divided up the courses is in humanities. And you can see the list of humanities. So I try to put people with experience in those different disciplines within that discipline to work on this work group. Then STEM would be the sciences and math and physics. There's a work group for them. And then fine arts and education. So that's the last work group. And what the committee is charged with in rules is to review courses that are for underutilized courses, to look for underutilized courses. And in rules, it gives us some parameters of what we should be thinking about when we're looking at courses that are underutilized. And in rules, it says that the committee has to consider, that doesn't mean they have to vote for a deletion, but they have to consider anything that's offered by only 3 community college. So on your spreadsheet, when you look at that, if a block is in red, that indicates that there are 3 or fewer community colleges actually offering that course during the time period, and we're looking at 5 years. So if you see a trend with 3 or fewer, that means that you need to think about and maybe ask some questions among each other. I'll be around to answer questions as well to help you make a decision on whether this is appropriate. Then the other parameter we have in rules is that for a course to get into the ACGM, there should be 5 universities that accept the course and apply it in some way. So what we use there, we look at where universities have equated a course, and we look at their enrollments in their equated course. So while that's not perfect, it's based on data, and it's the best we have. I know that it won't consider, degree plan substitutions, which wouldn't be reflected if the course is not equated, but it gives us a kind of a feel for, are there 5 universities that have an equivalent? And if they have an equivalent, more than likely there's a place in curriculum for that course. So on the spreadsheet, in the 4th column of each year, that will be in yellow if it's less than 5. Then also you're given the statewide enrollment. Some courses have a huge impact or a lot of students take, and then others not so many. We're going to be looking at 5 years of data and over statewide enrollments, and then the number of institutions. So number 1, you want to make sure you check where there's only 3 community colleges. You need to look at those. Doesn't mean you need to recommend them for deletion, but that's the charge to the committee. And then when you think about, well, should we keep this course? Is there a place for that course to go? Okay.
Okay, and as just a reminder, when you're making your decisions, it will not be enforced for 2 more years. So if it turns out to be a problem, there's plenty of time to correct it. So you'll see in the packet, just past that big stapled colorful thing, there's the agenda item 4. And so what we would like is for each group to produce a written document, and I'll ask someone from each group to give their findings, and even if your findings is you don't recommend anything for deletion, it would be good to just go ahead and write that down and, turn it in when we're done. We're going to expect maybe about 45 minutes to let each of the groups work, and I will close this part of the meeting down, and we will break into our working groups. You'll find at the tables, there's a placard for each group, so if you can find your group, we can get started on that.
For the call-ins, we'll be off the air for about 45 minutes, so if you want to call back at about 45 minutes, we should be back on.
back into session. If you're on the phone with us, could you please identify yourself and then mute your microphone?
Nancy Curie from Tarrant County College.
Kat Howard from Texarkana College.
Very good, thank you. So I'd like to get the report from each of the working groups. So humanities, somebody want to let us know what you found?
That's Ricky.
We've no recommendations for deletions at this time.
All right, thank you. From STEM?
The STEM group has quite a few recommendations, so I'll give everybody a chance to take notes here, and I'll try to speak slowly. The first three courses are courses in engineering, 2303, 2334, and 2403 within engineering. The second category is within math, 2321 and 2421. And the remaining 10 courses are all in nursing, the RNSG abbreviation or prefix. 1222, 1223, 1231, 1232, 2102, 2103, 2113, 2114, 2203, and 2204.
Thank you. We can open the discussion on these courses now, if there's any discussion on whether these should be recommended for removal or not.
Could you please repeat the course numbers in engineering?
Yes, ma'am. 2303, 2334, and 2403. $2403.
One comment about 2334, that's in a voluntary transfer compact, so we kind of leave those alone. We may need to get clarification when field of study has been developed, so I would postpone that consideration for 2334, which is thermodynamics, I think. Because it is in that voluntary transfer compact.
Okay.
But you're right, it's not in the new field of study. So that, and it never had strong enrollments. So, but it's in rules that we can't automatically delete one. That they automatically go in to the ACGM. Doesn't say that they stay in there. Do you think they can wait and talk about it? Wait it.
Okay.
Janice, are you wanting us to make motions and vote on these per subject area?
Sure, that's a good idea. So anyone want to move approval on the deletion of engineering 2303 and 2403?
So moved.
Second? Okay, any further discussion on the two engineering courses? All right, all in favor of deletion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the deletion of Math 2321 and 2421?
So moved.
Second? further discussion on the 2 mathematics courses? Okay, all in favor of deletion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right. On to the nursing, which is listed as RNSG, and the courses, so is there a motion to remove RNSG 1222, 1223, 1231, 1232, 2102, 2103, 2113, 2114, 2203, and 2204. Second? Okay, further, any discussion on this motion? All right, all in favor of the deletion of these 10 RNSG courses, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Now, on to fine arts. Any recommendations for deletion?
We have no recommendations for deletion. We do have recommendations for watching a few courses. Would you like us to list those or just end with no recommendations for deletion?
I'll go ahead and write them down. We
Okay.
can put them in the minutes as
Sure.
being, kind of
Okay, certainly.
marginal.
So for architecture, architecture 1315, computer graphics, the community college enrollment is good. However, watching that course, we recommend watching that course, as many other courses were placed into the field of study for architecture. Felt like this one should just be watched. Also in arts, Art 1313, in reviewing that course, it looked as if fiscal year 15 was an anomaly, but we've learned more that it may be a reporting of double equivalence that year. However, community college enrollment has increased, so we do recommend watching this course as well. With the recent dance, all the changes to dance, we did not review these. We want to wait and see how enrollments adjust. For drama, drama 1323, we were reviewing that course, but noticed that it was scheduled for deletion in August, so that one's fine. Education 1200, which is cross-listed also with Psych 1200. We recommend watching this course because many universities are trying to find the right fit, and the core curriculum changes may impact it as well. And so we recommend watching that for the next year or so. And then the others, again, no issues or concerns.
All right, thank you for that report.
We're now on item 5, and this is where we hear the updates from the coordinating board in terms of from the coordinating board staff in terms of activities that are ongoing. The first one on the agenda is Dr. Alan Mitchie, who is going to give us an update on the field of study, progress and plans.
Placard.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm not going to take much of your time. I just want to call your attention to a handout that you received. It has the updates for you of the times in which the fields of study are going to be coming forward to the board for their final approval. We've been very busy with these. Our priority has been to try to get the top 25 fields for transfer students approved by the time the next legislative session begins in January 2019, and we're well on our way to getting those top 25 done, and in fact we're already planning on the next 25 after that, so that we'll have the top 50 done. We're moving quickly through these. You can see on your handout, we've got psychology, social work, business, history, kinesiology, English language and literature, criminal justice, biology, and political science in the hopper and on their way to approval. And then shortly after that, in future board meetings, we have sociology, economics, mathematics, radio and television, computer science, drama, performing arts, communications, and health and wellness queued up. When these committees gather to consider what goes into the field of study, we're using the Academic Course Guide Manual as our Bible, as our menu of the courses that are available for us to include in the field of study. I've let committees know that they do have the authority to add or change courses in the ACGM, and to use that authority very, very carefully and very conservatively, because there's a large impact that a decision like that makes. Based upon that, there were a few situations in which a committee decided that they would like to have a new course included in the ACGM. In psychology, excuse me, they felt like it was important for abnormal psychology to be taught at the lower division. Many universities offer that at the 3,000 or 4,000 or even the graduate school level. But they felt that it was important for undergraduates at the lower division to get an introduction to abnormal psychology. So they recommended a new course in abnormal psychology and also a new course in biological psychology, which would basically be an overview of brain function. You know, didn't learn the parts of the brain and learn about the chemistry and the physics and the biology of the brain. Again, that's a course that is, of course, often taught in psychology programs, but not necessarily always at the lower division level. In social work, they wanted to add an academic cooperative course, which is modeled on many academic cooperatives that you find in other disciplines, which is essentially an internship or an externship opportunity for students to get some experience in the community doing social work. The business field of study, it started out as the Business Administration and Management Committee, but in discussion, they decided that their field of study could also apply to the fields of finance, marketing, accounting, and management information systems. They did not feel, however, that the business field of study could apply to economics. So we're going to go ahead and call a separate economics field of study committee to consider those courses. The business committee wanted to add a course in business statistics, which would be helpful to all of these fields that the business field of study would cover. There are statistics courses out there, of course, already in the ACGM, but they felt like the needs of business were so particular that a specific course in business statistics would be very helpful. And finally, they also recommended adjusting the learning outcomes for the existing ACGM course in business computer applications to just update it a little bit to include more advanced Excel programming, because that's so much of what is done in business computer applications courses. They felt they needed to boost that up. And also, they recently decided that they would like to have those learning objectives include more web-based programming instruction, because that's a capstone project that's often used in courses like this. So we will be moving forward with those new ACGM courses and adjustments, and learning outcomes committees will be called as time goes by to consider these recommendations, and we certainly welcome your impact on all that.
Any questions from any of the members? Again, I just want to encourage everyone how important it is to submit comments. When we are asked as an institution to submit comments, to please try to find out who in your institution is getting those requests. It usually is the chief academic officer. It's important that that information get to the appropriate faculty.
Right. The public comments have made a difference. There have been some changes in the fields of study based on the public comments. Every public comment is considered in full by every member of the committee and voted on and discussed, and I certainly second that. It's very important for us to get feedback from faculty all across the state about how a field of study will be implemented on their campus and how it will be considered in conjunction with the courses that they're already offering.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next person on the agenda is Dr. Andrew Lofters. He's going to give us an update on several areas: dual credit, distant ed, and newly adopted rules for the PSAT scores for dual credit.
Good morning. I wanted to start off by talking about some dual credit activities and policy changes that are going on right now and will affect delivery in the state. Oh, thank you, sir. During the last session, SB 1091 passed, which restricted courses that could be offered for dual credit. Already in funding, dual credit could be restricted to that institutions could file for funding or claim for funding to courses within the core curriculum of the institution, career and technical education courses, or foreign language courses. But in the past session, as far as courses that could be offered for dual credit, SB 1091 restricted those courses to those in the core, those in foreign language, and those in career and technology education. Now, courses that are offered within an approved early college high school, or what is really called inside the Texas Education Code, an early college education program, those could go outside of those restrictions. So you could have courses that were outside of core, career and tech, or foreign language, and still offer them for dual credit. But also there was another part that was put inside that bill called an early college program that assists students in achieving or earning an associate's or certificate. Within those programs, you could also offer courses that were outside of the core career and tech or foreign language. So what we had to do inside rules was actually codify what is an early college program that assists students in earning an associate's or certificate. So we went through the negotiated rulemaking process. It was required within the statute, and in January it was passed. And so I'm just showing you an excerpt from the definitions part of the rule. So we also defined the early college education program, which is truthfully the early college high school. These are approved by TEA. And then we also had to approve the early college program, which is a program that is developed within conjunction between the high school and the community college that has a defined sequence of courses leading to a board-approved certificate, AAAS, or AAS degree program as defined in Chapter 9 of rules, which defines what are associate degree programs and certificates. So we had to just codify that. Now, I wanted to bring that up. There was a part that comes up before institutions. They want to know, well, since we can now offer these courses outside of those three areas of core, career, and tech, and foreign language, can we get funded? Inside Texas Education Code, it allows that courses inside the early college education program, if they're outside of core, career, and tech, or foreign language, those can be funded. An institution can claim funding for those. However, courses that are in part of an early college program that are not core, career, and tech, and foreign language, those cannot be funded because that was not put in the funding part of the education code. So institutions need to be aware of that. Another bill that passed in the last session was HB 1638, and this required the THECB and the TEA to jointly develop statewide dual credit goals. And these goals must address, and they have to be in place by August 31st of 2018. Now, that's what the bill says. We're trying to get them done ahead of time so that institutions can go ahead and use these new goals when they're making new memorandums of understanding, which I'll show you in the next slide. But these goals must address the achievement of enrollment in and acceleration through post-secondary education. They must address the performance in college-level coursework and address how we can develop an effective bridge between the secondary and post-secondary education institutions in the state. Now, the next day after these are supposed to be in place, August 31st, any memorandum of understanding that is established or renewed on that date must have these parts inside their MOU. One, the MOU must be aligned with these goals that are developed between TEA and ourselves. Number two, they must also have a way of establishing or equating courses, how college courses equivalence with high school courses, which we already have, which we have inside dual credit. We have a thing called a crosswalk that shows this is the college course that the student is going to be taking, and this is the high school courses in which the credit will be substituted on their high school transcript. So that needs to be inside their MOU. They need to describe the academic supports that will be provided to the students in dual credit courses. They need to establish and define the roles of the district and the institution of higher education in delivering dual credit courses to students. State the sources of funding for, and they specifically said inside the legislation, tuition, transportation, required fees, and textbooks covered by the program. And all these this MOU and all these different parts of the MOU must be posted to the institution of higher education's and the school district's website. And this all starts September 1, 2018. Recently, we updated the PSAT dual credit eligibility scores inside rules. And the reason I put this up here, there's two ways that students can enroll or become eligible to enroll in dual credit courses. One, they can demonstrate eligibility by showing college readiness as defined by TSI and statute. And those ways are by passing the TSI assessment, making a passing score in the ACT, I should say qualifying score, ACT, SAT, Algebra 2 and English 3. Those are still inside statute. Now, not all students have access to these because due to the session before last, it required that they are optional to the districts. They may or not decide to offer them to students. The other option that the student has to demonstrate eligibility to enroll in a dual credit course only, because the top part here, the demonstration of college readiness, the student's really eligible to enroll in any kind of course because they're college ready. But the bottom part here with dual credit course eligibility, these are for dual credit courses only for high school students. And we had English 2 with a 4,000 on their end of course exam, Algebra 1 end of course exam with a 4,000 and a passing grade in the Algebra 2 course. They have to be in tandem. The PSAT score, they could have a qualifying score, and prior to October 15, 2015, it was a combined score of the critical reading and math of a 107 and having a 50 on whatever they had a 50 in that would allow that student to go into that area if it required demonstration of college readiness. They could enroll in that course. And then on the Plan and Aspire, those were also, there's the scores for those already in rule as well. Level 1 certificates and less don't require any kind of a demonstration of college readiness as is required in statute. In 2015, October 15, 2015, the College Board changed the PSAT test. With that change, they changed the entire scoring scheme. So when that happened, students were still taking the PSAT test and were trying to use their scores to enroll in dual credit enroll into a dual credit course, college course or dual credit, I should say, using these eligibility scores. However, since the scores were in rule and they were not changed yet, they could not use them. So we had to update with the new scores for scores after October 15, 2015. So what we did is we talked with College Board, we got concordance, and so we have the first one was for reading or writing. It has A, which is the old score, which is the combined score of 107 with a 50 in either reading or, oh sorry, this is reading. But the new score is at the bottom, a 460 in the evidence-based reading and writing test on the PSAT NMSQT. We only use that one test, PSAT NMSQT. These are for tests after October 15, 2015. You may notice there's no combined. It's just one score. And then this is what we updated for the math. We show that A, it has the old score, or combined score of 107 with a minimum of 50 in the mathematics test. But for the new scores, 510 on the mathematics, PSAT, NMSQT, and that'll be from October 15th going forward. And that was approved in the last board meeting, just last week, I believe. Last week. For this one, let me see if I can do this. I doubt it. I was trying to show you a distance education portal. Let's see if I can click it for you. That's good. I'll be fine right there. Starting in 2012, we started compiling all the distance education programs that are being offered by institutions of higher education. It was a tedious process because it required gathering spreadsheets from each institution, compiling them into a very large list between universities and community colleges, and coming up with one large list or database of distance education offerings at the programmatic level. And at that time, I was speaking to my leadership, and I was like, let's try to find a way that we'd never have to do this process again. So what we did, and with the support of leadership, we were able to create a distance education program search feature. What we did is we allowed institutions to then look at what they have inside their distance education offerings that we have in our database. We could then go ahead and update and approve what's already in there, and now it's up. And right now we're trying to have this portal that you don't see on this side as being the approval process for new distance education programs in the state. But the back end of the portal is a distance education program search. So you can go on this program search and search any kind of program that you want that's being offered by distance education. So for instance, just to give you an example, if I wanted to look at just 100% online programs offered from universities at the master's degree level, and nursing. The only reason I know that because I was just dealing with nursing upstairs. So if I was to go ahead and use two ways you can do it either through HTML, a PDF, or you can do it through Excel. You can search. Well, there's one. That tells you. In that zip code, in MSN in nursing, West Texas A&M University has a 100% online degree in that field. You can do this for off-campus, face-to-face, for different destinations or locations in the state. And this is one of the things that we're currently working on at the coordinating board. I believe of mine. If you have any questions on distance education or dual credit, I'm the contact person or the primary contact for the division, if you have any.
Any questions from the membership at this point?
I have a question.
Yes,
Andrew,
ma'am.
this is back the first part of your presentation on the goals related to dual credit and the reporting dates that are going to be required for institutions who have agreements. So the reporting date to make sure that institutions can align their dual credit programmatic goals with the state's defined goals is September 1, correct?
For memorandums of understanding that are being established or renewed September 1st, 2018 going forward.
Right.
That's when we're going to start using these new goals. Yes, ma'am.
And you mentioned that you were hoping that the goals would be published and available this summer?
Oh, well, that's a good question. We have already had 3 meetings.
Great.
That sounds right. 3 meetings already had with TEA already.
Great.
Talking with TEA. We already have a backbone of the goals
Yes.
already established. We're now going to go and revise our portion
Okay.
and send them to TEA.
Okay.
It's interesting that the legislation is through public school law. So we are now, like I said, updating ours. We've already talked with them. We've devised a good backbone of the rules. We're now going to add our parts in that we think needs to be in, send them to TEA, and then probably we're hopefully to get the rules out by this summer. Yes, we want to get them out this summer so that institutions have time enough
Yes.
to incorporate these new goals when they put in their MOUs.
And coordinating board will be sending institutional liaisons a notification when those are out?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then a second question is the requirement to post online the MOUs. Is that inclusive of MOUs for early college high schools?
Everything.
Okay.
Everything.
In fact, inside the bill, I'm trying to go through memory now. It does say dual credit programs, early college high schools. It even says courses for joint high school and college credit, just the same way that they listed inside the 130.008 for community colleges, all that's, and I think it even says career dual credit, all that's inside that bill, yes.
Will we receive a copy of this presentation, or is it online?
I can provide
You can ask me about it, and I'll send it to you. He's given it to me. We've got it on file, so we
Okay.
can send it to you if you want it. Just send me an email.
Any other questions? Thank you, Andrew. The next item, or the next person up is Rebecca Leslie, who's going to give us an update on the ACGM Learning Outcomes projects.
Okay, we have on our calendar to do a learning outcomes project for social work, and that was one of the field of study groups that met, and they do want learning outcomes. So we're those were the last discipline not to have ever an opportunity to do some learning outcomes. So we'll do that this summer, and then also while these fields of study, which are between board committee approval and board approval, we're going to try to get some learning outcome groups for the psychology courses and the business courses as well. So we're looking at social work, then the 2 psych courses, and looking at business. So there will be a call for nominations. This is not committee, this is for work groups. We usually get 12 faculty, and so that call for nominations will go out soon, and we'll try to do the meetings probably in July, June and July.
Any questions for Rebecca? All right, the next item is, or the next individual is Dr. Rex Peebles, who has quite a bit of information to share with us.
Tell me on what? I forget exactly what it is I'm supposed to talk about. Well, thank you.
You got it?
Okay. I'll start with the last one, dual credit, since Andrew just presented on dual credit. And all I wanted to mention was that, of course, dual credit continues to be an object of some interest for a lot of reasons by a lot of people. I would like to point out that while dual credit enrollment previous to this year shot up in size dramatically, up to about 150,000 in fall of 16. In fall of 17, it only went up to about 152,000 students enrolled in dual credit. So it seems to, at least for this year, its growth has been pretty flat. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if that's because we have reached a limit on number of students who are actually eligible for dual credit, so to speak, or whether we've just run up against limits on resources and folks' ability to meet the demand. Because I would expect that if we're going to see growth, it could come in particularly CTE dual credit, so dual credit geared toward career and technical education, because it's still only about 12% of all dual credit is in CTE, and the other 88% is still in academic transfer courses. So we may see some growth there, although that's where you can really run up against your ability to provide dual credit because of the cost involved. And career and technical education is typically a fairly expensive proposition because it oftentimes requires equipment and specialized facilities, labs, and that kind of thing that's expensive to operate. And one of the ongoing issues with dual credit going forward will be funding. because there's a lot of community colleges in particular beginning to figure out, and they've known this for a long time, academic transfer courses have long subsidized career and technical education at community colleges. Most career and technical education programs at community colleges lose money, and academic transfer programs make a lot of money. And so historically, they have been used to pay for career and technical education. Nobody talks about this very much, by the way, but it's always been true. And as community colleges have begun to, or started giving away, so to speak, in terms of not charging tuition and fees for dual credit, and as that percentage of their enrollment has gone up, we have a community college in Texas that last year 55% of their enrollment was in dual credit. And if you're not charging tuition and fees for all of that, that's a business model that cannot be sustained. And so funding is going to loom ever larger as an issue with dual credit. And there are 3 studies devoted to, and one other thing that still people talk about a lot is the, sort of the rigor and quality issue of dual credit. And is there rigor and quality? And it's probably like almost all college, and yes, sometimes there is, and some no, sometimes there's not. We have graduate programs where there's not necessarily rigor and quality involved, and so that's an issue that is systemic to higher education. It can go at any level. Some are more rigorous than others, and I mean that's always been true. We have classes now at all levels that don't meet rigor and quality standards. We have a lot of them that do. But in dual credit, it's been particularly picked out because of the concern of students who come to particularly four-year institutions after a lot of dual credit and whether they're really prepared or not. So there are 3 studies underway currently. I've not seen the final results of any of them. There's a study that UT system has done on its own, internal to the UT system, and we expect those results or the final report to be out any day, but we've been saying that for about 3 months now. So, who knows? Any day now. And but that's one study. There's also a study being conducted, or really not a study, but sort of a study that'll have recommendations attached to it. That was a joint venture of both UT and TAC, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, where there was system representatives from four-year schools were also on that task force. Coordinating board personnel were on that task force. And so there was a lot of wide variety of people on that one to look at the issues of dual credit, but it also included superintendents and public education representatives as well, to look at the whole issue of dual credit, and particularly focused on, to some extent, the funding issue, and try to how to sustain it going forward. And then formerly RAND, but it's now been turned over to AIR, has, along with the coordinating board, is also conducting a study of dual credit. And it is also tries to address issues like advising and funding, and tries to get at the rigor and quality issue some, although, I've discovered that, if we ask everybody in this room to define rigor and or quality in some way, I don't know how many of us there are in the room, but we'd probably wind up with at least one more opinion than we actually have people in the room. And so it's somewhat like trying to define critical thinking. I've noticed that often runs the same way. If you ask 10 people what to define critical thinking, you'll get at least 11 definitions of it. And I think rigor and quality sort of falls into that category, although these things often remind me of the old Supreme Court saw about pornography. We don't know how to define it, but we know it when we see it, kind of thing. And as someone who used to be a supervisor of colleges over faculty, I think there's a lot of truth in that. If you asked me to quantify who the best faculty were, that was difficult to do, but I sort of knew who they were. I mean, I knew who the best ones were, and I knew who the worst ones were. And everybody did. It wasn't just me. Everybody on campus knew who they were as well. Other faculty, other students, administrators, and so forth. But it's not one of those things that we could easily quantify. But we're trying to look at some of those issues. So hopefully, most, if not all of those studies will have some conclusions drawn by the end of the summer. And the idea is whether that'll be able to affect legislation going into next year or not. So we'll just have to see how that turns out. So let me go back to the top of this then, core curriculum and UEAC. So one of the things that I've asked, well, let me back up one step. A lot of you may know that in the last legislative session, particularly in the Senate, transfer became a big issue. And there was a lot of attention paid to transfer. There was a lot of questions raised about core curriculum. One of them, questions that I got asked about it in testimony was, so what do you mean there's more than one core curriculum in Texas? It says in statute that the coordinating board shall establish a core curriculum. So what do you mean there's more than one? How is it that every institution has a core curriculum? And I think that got explained away fairly well in the sense that if the second paragraph of the legislation, second section of it, talks about how you set this up, and I think it provides the room for every institution to have their own within parameters established by the coordinating board. But there are other issues with it. I was also questioned about how is it that there are division courses in the core, how is it that there are courses in the core that are not a part of the Common Course numbering system, because the statute says that courses in the core curriculum shall be consistent with the Common Course numbering system. Elsewhere in statute, the Common Course numbering system, the coordinating board is required elsewhere in statute to identify and adopt a Common Course numbering system currently in use. And when that legislation was passed, it was the Texas Common Course numbering system that we all know and love so much. That was in common use at the time, so doing what the statute directed the coordinating board to do, they adopted that one as the Common Course numbering system. We have a lot of courses in the core curriculum that is questionable, I think, whether they're consistent with, and what does that mean? And so we've asked UEAC to sort of tackle these issues and really think this through and think about what it means to be consistent with the Common Course numbering system, and how would that affect institutions and so forth. So those are some of the issues that we've had them look at. We've also had them sort of revisit this whole idea of particularly the component area option, which as a part of the core curriculum, for those of you who are familiar with the core, you got 42 hours and 6 hours of it are designated as component area option, and that has always been the part that vexes people more than anything else does, including me. And so what do you do with it? And so we've asked UEAC to look at possibly going back to, in some form or fashion, perhaps the original recommendation from UEAC on this iteration of the core, which was to have the component area option connected to core objectives, but not necessarily connected to a foundation area component definition. The way it is now, if you want a course in the component area option, it's supposed to meet core objectives assigned to it, but it's also supposed to be connected to a component area definition, which then, to some extent, maybe perhaps to a great extent in some cases, limits what you can do with courses in the component area options. So one of the things they've also been asked to look at is what's the possibility of opening that back up again. So UEAC took this up at their meeting a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was, I don't know, whatever, 2 or 3 weeks ago anyway, when they last met. They may have another meeting in the summer to address these issues, but they'll certainly take it up again in the fall. I was asked by the chief academic officers the other day for the 4-year schools about when all this might, if any changes, when they would all take effect. And so I view this as sort of it's going to be a somewhat long process. I would not imagine any rule changes going to the board before the October board meeting, and maybe not even then, but that would be the earliest date that we might try to take something to the board, maybe even more like January. It just depends on how it evolves. And then there would probably be at least a year or two time period for implementation. If you're going to make changes, you've got to give institutions some time to adjust to this stuff and to deal with the changes that might bring for them, for faculty and courses and schedules and all that kind of stuff it affects. And so there'd probably be at least a 1 and probably more like a 2-year time period for implementation. Open education resources. So we have this week on Wednesday, there will be a stakeholders meeting about open education resources. And so if you're not familiar with this, in the last legislative session, there was legislation passed with regard to this. It has two components to it. And one is to require the coordinating board to conduct a feasibility study on establishing a repository for open education resources. And on Wednesday, we're going to bring in a lot of people from things like the Texas Library Association, the Texas Digital Library, and so forth. We have a couple of people, one from Georgia and one from California, who have set up and operated open education resource repositories to talk about what's involved in this and the costs and that kind of thing. Whether it's more feasible to develop your own, it's probably not the case, or to use somebody or something that already exists. People have even asked me about whether we want to try to resurrect, what was it called, TextLore, which was the Texas Learning Objects Repository. That when it ran out of money, it kind of went defunct, but we'll also have the person who was in charge of it come and talk to us about how that worked and the feasibility of this going forward. So that's one piece of it, is to look at this whole idea of, is it feasible for Texas to establish one? What would the cost of that look like? What would it entail? That kind of thing. Then the other piece of this is that it also established a grant program. We were given $200,000 over the biennium to go out to faculty and ask them to develop open education resources. And so that RFA will go out as soon as I get finished with it, which hopefully will be any day now. Unlike that other any day now I mentioned, this really should be more like any day now, hopefully. And but as soon as I can get that finished and get out the door, you should see an RFA come out for faculty to develop open education resources, and these will be $5,000 or $10,000 grants to faculty to develop them. It sort of begs the question of what do we do with them if we get them. I don't know what the answer to that is at the moment, but we'll figure out something. I mean, maybe we've got the cart before the horse here. I don't know. But we do have that, and the senator who introduced all of this legislation really views this as seed money and hopes to see this grow. Next time around, there'll be even more money for grants and that kind of thing. You know, where open education resources have been used, you know, essentially it's free to the student, okay? And that their textbooks and that kind of stuff winds up being free to the student. It's unfortunately, it's not free. I mean, because it's free to the student doesn't mean it's free. Somebody has to pay for all this somewhere along the line. But, you know, what we do know is that students increasingly, because of the price of textbooks, have a tendency to either delay the purchase or not make it at all. And that is oftentimes very detrimental to their learning. And it puts a lot of pressure on faculty then to how do you try to get around that somehow? And you know, and if someone who taught for a long time, you know, that can lead to, I mean, it goes back to the rigor and quality question to some extent. You know, you need that stuff to really provide the kind of rigor and quality you need, but we also need to make it affordable to students. You know, in a lot of community colleges, and this may even be true of some, well, it's probably not true of four-year schools yet, but in a lot of community colleges, you can wind up paying more for your textbook than you do for the class. Okay, and so that's, and the classes are not getting any cheaper either. So all of this is designed to try to look at that issue and do something about it. So hopefully that RFA will be coming out soon, and people will go to work on this. And then last but not least, the legislative interim meeting. So the legislature in between their sessions, so they meet every 2 years for 140 days. Yeah, 140 days every 2 years, and they meet in odd-numbered years, so they'll be meeting again starting in January. They'll end in about May or so, sometime in May, barring special sessions. In between, they often conduct what are called interim hearings on things, and so the House and Senate higher education committees will be conducting interim hearings. They've already conducted a couple. One was on finance and funding for higher education. There was an interim hearing that revolved around One was progress on 60 by 30 on the state's higher education strategic plan. And so you'll see some of those coming up. There's generally always at least one devoted to progress on legislation passed last time. You know, so what are you doing to implement the legislation that was passed long ago? You would think and maybe hope that they just forget about that and move on, but they don't. They actually ask us if we're actually implementing. It takes them years to forget about it. Well, it usually takes until the person who introduced it is no longer there. But they, you know, they introduce this stuff for a reason, and I think that, you know, one of the things I've come to really believe this, and I'm a political scientist by training, so I go into all this stuff with a lot of cynicism. But I think most of them mean well. You know, I think they have the best of intentions when they pass legislation, and there's always unintended consequences, and things don't necessarily always work out the way you'd hope they would. But most of these folks really do work with the best intentions at heart, and they do have an interest in whether what they have passed is it implemented, and is it working or not? Is it really doing what it was supposed to do? Is it causing unintended consequences that are not good, that are detrimental, and so forth? And then they have an interest in changing it if it is. So a lot of it will revolve around looking at the past, but also going forward as well. So I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have about any of that or anything else you can think of.
Any questions from the members?
It's more of a comment about the OER.
Okay.
I'm glad to see that, you know, the work is being done in trying to check into it, because you're right about the cost for students, and it's something that weighs on us heavily at my college. I've started doing some research last year on it and really look forward to your findings, because now we're being inundated with companies that are trying to monetize the OER. And so it's just some clarity, I think, will be great from the coordinating board leadership in this area, because even if you don't pass the cost on to the student, like you said, it's not free. And then where do you put all this stuff on the platforms? And it's just a lot to it. So I'm looking forward to what you'll be putting forward.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Rex.
Okay, agenda item 6 is an update of the member terms and estimation of meeting costs. So for the estimation of meeting costs, again, you have that in your packet. It's, you know, just make a good estimate. The state requires keeping track of how much these meetings cost, and so if you could turn that in to Rebecca when we're adjourned, that would be great. For the members with terms expiring August 31st, which to some extent means today, I will be ending my term, and thanks everyone. This has been a really interesting and good learning opportunity. Dr. Clunas, Dr. Curie, Ms. Davis, Ms. Desero, and Mr. White, thank you all for your service. It's been very much appreciated.
Talk about the new members.
Oh, I could need to read all my notes. So we will be getting 6 new members that will be presented at the July Coordinating Board meeting for approval, and they'll start their new term September 1st. And as we've started doing the last few years, there'll be a doodle poll going out after September 1st so that you can get these very important dates on your calendar.
Thank you, Dr. Epstein, for serving as co-chair. You've done an excellent job. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of future work and meeting dates. So one of the things that we'll be discussing at the fall meeting is going to be the Learning Outcomes Project that we just heard from Rebecca. We'll be listening to the results of those projects and the recommendations that they're going to bring forward. And so we'll review the report and make approval or other recommendations. There's also been there have been some inquiries from some institutions, and the inquiry that's come through to the coordinating board has been making a change to some rubrics. I believe that the change right now is wanting to change the rubric that's currently used for speech to a different rubric. And so we're going to ask, John, you're here with the TCC NS, and I think that one of the recommendations is that if you could do a poll of the TAC roll members in terms of what will happen if there was a change of a rubric. What would be the challenges? What would be some of the unintentional consequences?
Okay. We'd be happy to do that poll of both the TACRO and the TCCS institutional members, see what they come up with as implications of how that will or will not impact transferability, a few other things.
And then, so if you could bring a report to us at our next meeting?
Okay.
That would be great.
My next question was going to be, when do you need it by? So.
Our next meeting would be great.
Okay.
Any questions in reference to that? All right, so then in terms of our meeting dates, what we typically do is we do a doodle poll to see what's going to be the best date that everyone is available. So that'll be being sent out by Rebecca. About when?
I'll wait until the new members are approved in July, so.
Okay.
And it will be for the fall meeting and the spring, so for their full year.
So we meet once a semester, so we'll look forward to seeing you then. I believe that's it on this item, unless someone has any questions in reference to future work.
So before moving on to adjournment, any comments or concerns? Is there a motion to adjourn? All right, second? Okay, so we are all in favor of adjourning, please rise. I will say we are adjourned at 11:40. Thank you so much.
Thank you.